John Schumann is a 2002 Raider graduate. During his time at Hastings High School, he was a multi-sport athlete, competing in football, hockey, tennis, and baseball. In football, John was a 2-year starter at quarterback and led the team to the state semifinals during his junior year and a 2001 state championship his senior year, defeating Blaine 28-9. In hockey, John was a 3-year letter winner and was a member of 2 state tournament teams, taking 3rd his sophomore year and 4th his junior year. Finally, in baseball, John was a 2-year letter winner. After high school, John attended the University of Minnesota, where he played football for 1 year. He then transferred to UW-Lacrosse, where he played football for 4 years, and as a quarterback, led the team to the D3 National Semifinals during his senior year. John gives an amazing interview where he highlights many coaches across all the sports he played, along with the teammates who helped have a positive impact on him. Here we are with John Schumann. John, we always like to start at the beginning of someone's life, so let's hear about the beginning of your life. We like hearing about if you're always from Hastings. Did your family eventually move from Hastings? Let's hear about your mom, your dad, any brothers and sisters. Once again, your family growing up.
Sure. I appreciate you having me on. So my family consists of my sister who's 3 years older. She graduated from Hastings in 1999. And I have a younger brother, 3 years younger. He graduated in 2005. My parents are both originally from Eastern Wisconsin, and I was born in the Chicagoland area. And then we moved to Hastings when I was 5 years old. My dad took a job at Coke Refinery, which is now Flint Hills. And that's when we moved to Hastings. So that would have been, I was 5, late 80s.
Right on. So, Packers fan or Vikings fan? That's a big deal around here. If you guys were born and raised in Eastern Wisconsin, this could be a hot button issue.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. So my parents, both being from Wisconsin, are big Packer fans. And then just with buddies and growing up in Minnesota, I became a Vikings fan, but I really like Brett Favre. And then naturally Favre came over to the Vikings. And now it's come full circle because our children, especially our boys, are like second grader and kindergarten, are both Packer fans
Mm.
because they've been hanging around grandpa too much.
That's awesome. A divided house. I like it. That's okay. As long as Thanksgiving doesn't get too heated, then that's fine then.
Yeah, there you go.
You moved here when you were young. Do you remember any of the schools you went to? We like hearing about that as well. I really like hearing about some teachers that had a really big impact on you. I always send these out to the teachers too. So it's really nice to hear their names and hearing about a student they had over 20 years ago, and a student actually remembers them and talks about them having a big impact. So just quickly talk about the schools you went to. And then once again, you don't have to talk about every teacher you had, but if there's a teacher at each level that really had a big impact on you, let's hear about them.
Oh, for sure. I guess we could probably talk the whole half an hour here on teachers who had positively impacted me when I was a kid. But first that come to mind would be Mrs. Rickert. For those that are listening probably remember the Rickerts. I actually had her in kindergarten and in 2nd grade. She was an awesome teacher. And then Mr. Cost was my 5th grade teacher, and this was at McCullough. And one of the main reasons I like Mr. Cost is we did football picks every Friday. So that was really cool. And he'd post our picks and kind of the competition with your classmates. And he also would levy out $5 fines for attitude or language. And anybody who had Mr. Cost, he was just an awesome guy, and hold up the 5 fingers for the $5 fine if you're doing something wrong. Those would be the elementary teachers that could go offhand. And then went to which is now the schoolhouse square that Pat Regan developed. The old middle school was there. And Mr. Snowbeck comes to mind. And Mrs. Kunkel, she was a hard-nosed math teacher. And I always really liked math. Mr. Moore, he was a longtime counselor at the middle school. And he would always come around for birthday celebrations and do Mr. Moore things with throw on the goofy glasses and with his voice and sing happy birthday. So I guess memories of middle school, And then high school, we were 3 years. Our class graduated in '02, so we were 3 years at the old high school, and then we were the first class graduate. We didn't go all the way through, but our senior year was in the new high school. So I guess that was a rundown of the schools. McCullough, the old middle school, and then went to both the high schools.
Anybody at the high school that once again had a big impact on you then?
Mr. Zach, um, who is now in Egan, he's a principal in Egan, and he had a huge impact on me for like a couple ways. He coached our ninth grade football team, and he was a super energetic, positive, just an awesome coach to have at that level, at the ninth grade level. What I remember about Mr. Zach is after a couple of our ninth grade football game, not from a school standpoint, but from a sports side of things, we were walking through the hallway, and a couple times he'd call me over, and he had season Gopher football tickets at the time. He'd be like, if one of us had a good game, be like, "Hey, you had an awesome game on Thursday. By the way, I got 4 Gopher tickets. Watch the Gophers play Michigan or something." So he that was my first time going to a Gopher football game, was free tickets from Mr. Zach. And then I would say Mr. Craftston. I don't know if you know that name. He probably retired, Tim, before you started there, but Mr. Craftston was an awesome teacher, social studies, and just really made you think. Mr. Minder, he was awesome. Jarl Olson, Mr. Olson. Yeah, I could continue going on, but those would be the first that would come to mind as teachers that had an impact.
Perfect. Yeah. I like that. So John, this is mainly a sports podcast, so we focus mainly around sports. Let's hear about your life growing up in sports. Do you have an earliest memory of sports? And then let's hear about that. And then walk us through your sports career. I really like stopping maybe around that ninth grade level or 10th grade, somewhere around that point. That's when it seems like most of the people that we have on here get a little more serious with sports, get brought up to maybe a high school level, sometimes early, or I should say late in the middle school career is when some people get brought up to the high school level and start playing. So once again, let's hear about the sports you played growing up. I'm sure there's a wide variety of sports. And once again, let's stop maybe around that initial high school level.
Sure. Well, I'm sure similar to you, Tim, the world's changed so much in the last 15, 20 years, 25 years in so many ways, but especially with organized sports. Having young children now, and it seems like every single night we're running into an activity, and they're in, kindergarten, second grade. So what I'm getting at is, when growing up in Hastings, like I mentioned, moved there when I was in kindergarten, basically played everything outside, but it was back when we still had time to play outside, and it was
Mm.
unstructured. So it was wiffle ball, the trees as bases, making up a game. I can still remember with the neighbors throwing tennis balls off the roof and then seeing who could catch it. A ton of foursquare, a lot of football in the street. Pleasant Park had a ponding basin, and we used to get a group of kids from all over. We lived on West 23rd Street. That's where I grew up. And there was kids off of Brittany Road, 20 on down to 15th Street. We would all meet at the park and play unstructured baseball. So I think the earliest memories I have is just a lot of joy from playing, right? Not even a coach tell you how to hold a bat, or tell you a coach showing you how to throw a ball. And I think that is lost a little bit now, where it's so much structure and so much coaching, almost over coaching. So then I did get into, as you get a little bit older, Hastings did an awesome job with all their in-house programs. They played in-house soccer, baseball, hockey, Little Raiders football. I didn't start playing football till I was in 5th grade. Nobody in my family had any background being from Eastern Wisconsin in hockey, but a neighbor of mine, Nick Harris, um, he was a hockey player. His dad introduced him to hockey at a young age in kindergarten, and grabbed a friend, brought me along. And so I started playing hockey at a young age and fell in love with that game, although nobody in my family knew much about it. So yeah, those would be the early memories of just playing a lot. We had an awesome neighborhood growing up. At any given time, we had 10, 15 kids playing wiffle ball or whatever the game was that particular day. Looking back on it now and having kids that are now at those stages of life, it's funny. At full six brings you back to when you were a kid and we just played so much unstructured where I almost feel bad sometimes bringing our kids to so much structured play, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
yeah, that's my earliest recollection of, and then getting into organized sports and then ended up playing travel baseball, travel hockey into the middle school years, football in middle school. Back then, it was through the school. I'm sure you know this now, Tim, but it's changed now where it
Mm.
is through associations or you need parent volunteers. Whereas back, we didn't start football practice in middle school until after Labor Day when school starts. Now,
Yeah.
driving around first part of August and kids in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, they're already starting tackle football early August, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just so much different, right? Where they lose that whole month of the summer and now it's through because it has to be at nighttime. So dads have to help volunteer. It's just, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for it with cost and liability and everything, but just getting back to how we just had a lot more time to be kids at those younger ages. And then it got more structured. I would say fifth, sixth grade, whereas now traveling starts kindergarten and first grade. So a lot of
Yeah.
unstructured play.
Yeah. I like a lot of what you just said there too. First thing that brought to mind was I love living in Hastings. We have, you talked about Pleasant Park. That's right down the street from my house. Actually, where I live now is a block away from where you grew up here. So, pretty cool. But we have so many great parks in town. So I just love that number one too. But, it's sad too, talking about football as well is a big one right now. And our seventh and eighth grade program just went down with the Little Raiders program. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think mainly it's the other towns that are doing the same thing, and we can't really find a lot of teams to play with. But now, like you said too, now we don't have the teachers coaching the kids right after school. We're relying on dads to coach at nighttime, which once again, nothing wrong with that. We have great dads that are coaching, phenomenal coaches that are coaching our youth. But I just look back to what you said 5 minutes ago with Mr. Zach pulling you in the hallway, a teacher that you see every single day. And then he's also your coach. So this guy's making multiple connections with you throughout the day and getting a passion and a love for the Gophers instilled in you at a young age, losing out on that a little bit too. So it's a give and take when we have after school sports, which is a great thing. Kids roll right from school to sports. Um, but now we're a different model as well. So once again, give and take, not good and bad either way, but losing a little bit here, gaining a little bit there. So a little sad, but a little happy too. So it's a crazy deal going on right now with that.
Definitely. Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah. So talk about your high school career. So let's hear about the earliest age you started playing a high school sport. And then I really like going year by year. So once again, if you started a high school sport in seventh or eighth grade, let's hear about that. But then let's go from maybe the ninth grade fall season to ninth grade winter to ninth grade spring. Let's hear about those sports you played, any accomplishments too. I know sometimes this is the way back machine, right? So it's hard to think about was I all conference that year or was I all state this year or different things or did we make it to the section finals? Did we qualify for the state tournament over 20 years ago? It's really hard to remember that stuff. But if you can talk about any team accomplishments, personal accomplishments like captain, all conference, things of that nature with each sports, let's hear about that, John.
Sure. And feel free to butt in or stop me at any time. My freshman year, instead of starting in the fall, I played tennis, varsity tennis as a freshman. That was my first taste, I guess, varsity athletics was I played tennis and baseball through middle school and then my freshman year, high school. And so I did played tennis as a freshman, played doubles. Actually, we had a great group of guys. I think we lost in the section finals. It's funny. I don't even remember that stuff. Just remember that we had Derek Garcia was a senior. We had the Toppin brothers, Creans. We had set a good group of kids. So I did that, and I'm really glad I did it. Meet a whole different group of friends. And then fall, I guess going season by season here would be fall was football. I played football in the fall. So in high school, the freshman team, I mentioned Mr. Zach, and we just had a really good group of football players, good athletes, tough kids. So we had a lot of, even in middle school, I don't know, maybe we lost a game or two in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, but we just had a really good group of kids. And that continued in ninth grade. We all played together. 10th grade, a majority of us played together. They did. Adam Welch and Tom Desatel got called up to the big squad. So we lost them our sophomore year. Pete McGinnis coached us, Colin Anderson, and we just had, man, those guys were great coaches. And we ran about how you, it just seems like sometimes you overthink things, especially in football plays. We ran maybe 5 plays, and I still remember Pete McGinnis. What it was like one word, like pro right, fade left, or run right. It was just so simple, but we just executed better than the other team, and we had like I said, a good tough group of kids. So we built a lot of confidence over those years in middle school and high school, playing together, developing a good bond, and then also I think you build confidence by having some success. And we won a lot of football games. And at that time, Hastings was starting to build what they became in the late 90s, early 2000s with the football program. So I still remember Joel Selesky was serving in middle school. I was 8th grader, was serving lunch at the middle school, and he was the varsity quarterback. And how much you didn't want to be a Minnesota Viking or a Gopher or playing college, but you dreamt of playing on Todd Field. And I thought that was something that was really cool about what Hastings created in those 90s and early 2000s was that was the big time. Underneath the lights, playing at Todd Field. That's what it was. You didn't know any better. You didn't know, I guess the internet was just coming on, so there wasn't so much information. But going on a little tangent here, but the dream of every kid that played football at that time was a run out underneath the lights at Todd Field. So we had a really good group of kids. Then into our junior year, you want me to keep going fall or
Keep on
you
going.
tell
Yep.
me? Keep on going fall. Okay.
Yeah.
So then into our junior year, Hastings 98 was the first year they still, that's when you fall in love with the game or the joy is they went to the Metrodome for the first time and Charlie Black, a 99-yard touchdown pass he threw. So but from that point on, it was, you are going to the Metrodome or you're pretty much a failure. And the expectation was so high in a good way.
Yeah.
Like the expectation is now 98, they made it to the Metrodome. 99, they're knocking on the door, got upset, I believe, by the eventual state champs. 2000, they go to the Metrodome, losing the semifinals. So what I'm getting at is it just built and built. And being a youngster growing up in that is that was it wasn't, I still remember to this day. I'll tell you a quick story. Mr. Moore, we lost the game now to our junior year. Okay. We go up to St. Thomas and Tom Desatel beat me out as a starting quarterback. We competed for the starting job. He won the job. We go up to St. Thomas and we got beat. And it was at the old high school right by the tennis courts where we used to practice. And Mr. Moore is going around with the clipboard asking all of us who did Raiders Express that summer. Because it was, if you lost the game, and maybe you've heard, but if you lost the game, because the expectation, it wasn't we didn't win every game, but it was 1, maybe 2 losses a season for 6 to call it 10-year stretch there. So we lose, and it's holy smokes. Like, you don't want this feeling again. Long story short, Tom and I, in my junior year, had played quarterback all the way up. Get beat out by Tom Desatel, and he starts the first half of the season. And Tom's one of my best friends now. Tom's an unbelievable athlete. At the time, the offense, Coach Majeski built it up, the split back veer. Tom's more athletic than I am. He got the starting nod. We started out okay, but middle of the season, we struggled. And then I had an opportunity to play. And from there, started the rest of the season. Actually worked out blessing in disguise because Tom Destel then became a two-way starter for us. That year, we made a deep run. We lost in the semifinals at the Metrodome to Eden Prairie. I guess a memory of that season would be a lot of times the games to go to the state tournament, you probably hear, probably like in wrestling, Tim, for you guys, like the section finals to go to the state tourney or the section final hockey game to go to the state tournament. We played down Rochester John Marshall and it was super cold and we eked out. It was one of the best football games I've ever been involved in, a back and forth game. We ended up winning with the last second touchdown, I think under 30 seconds, and punched our ticket to the Metrodome. And then we lost in the semis. And then, so sticking with the fall and into the senior season, again, expectations super high. You've now gone to the Hastings has gone to the Metrodome 5 straight years. So it's you got to put up more seniors. Okay. A different leadership role for our core group. We had an awesome group of seniors our junior year. Adam Hoffman, Nick Wagner, Jake Johnson, that group of guys, and just really tough kids, hardworking guys that kind of set the expectation again for us. The bar was raised another level. So we went into our senior year and we started off slow. We were 2-2. We lost our first game at home. And talk about you lose the first game. Holy, what is going on here? And we weren't used to losing. And then we lost. We started out 2-2. And it was everybody look yourself in the mirror. What are we doing here? And then we just started to peak at the right time and put it all together towards the end of the regular season. And then we went on a deep run into the playoffs. And there were some memorable games there. Again, looking back on it now, when you said we went to hadn't been to a high school football game, besides coming back to Hastings for some of the reunions, but now the kids are getting to an age where we go over there and the excitement of a high school football game again and going to a couple every fall. You forget how cool that is underneath the lights. Senior year, make it to the Metrodome. We win our semifinal game, play that John Marshall team again in the semis. And by that point, we were clicking pretty good and we beat them pretty handily. And then we played Blaine in the championship game. And I think we were probably the underdogs, Blaine being a bigger suburb. And we ended up beating them in the playoffs. I guess the biggest memory I would have from that championship season would be we hosted Eden Prairie at Todd Field. Because back then, they've gone to neutral sites now, I believe. But Tim, for that first round of the state tournament. But back then it was ran every other year, the certain section champion would host the game. So we hosted Eden Prairie. And I'll never forget Mike Grant. He did an interview before the game. I couldn't remember any plays for that game, but I can remember Coach Majeski and how fired up we were beforehand because he said something in the interview. They didn't know where Hastings was or we were out in the cornfields. That kind of galvanized us we always had that chip on our shoulder of, oh, they're just kids from the country or where's Hastings? Maybe you even get that sometimes with wrestling, kind of playing the underdog role. When you guys went on your run and when you guys beat St. Michael here a couple years ago. But that was something I know somebody said it in the locker room and we are not losing this game. Come hell or high water, we're not losing this game. The score probably wasn't indicative of how much we dominated that game. I don't think they had 100 yards. Our defense was unbelievable. And so, anyways, that would be the summation of the fall.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of those same stories, interviewing a few people here and obviously talking to people too. I work with Adam Welch and I like to pull up I think he had about 2 or 3 interceptions in the state finals game. So sometimes when he's walking down the hallway, I like to pull him in my classroom and show him the glory days. when he was rocking and rolling back in the day. But I know talking to John Majeski, I believe, was talking about it, and you mentioned it as well. But that 2-2 starts the season, and I think he said you guys went to Champlin Park. I believe is one of the teams, and they had just a weird run and gun. Maybe it was. Nah, I'm pretty sure it's Champlin Park. Yep, just like a weird, just a fast paced offense. You guys weren't used to it yet, and you took a loss there, and then you guys are 2-2. He said the coaches did a great job shaking some things up, moving people in different positions, and really maximizing the talent that you had on the team. And then, as you mentioned, the rest is history.
Yeah, you're spot on, and you have a good memory. It was Champlin Park. They beat us at home to open the season at Todd Field, and then we lost another game to Mounds View, and we didn't score a point. We lost 6-0, and it was probably 5 inches of rain the night before. They did something with the field.
Mhm.
It was literally the worst conditions. It was like playing in a pigsty. No lie, you can hardly run. But in hindsight, it's like anything. The adversity probably brought our team closer together. We had to figure out what we were going to hang our hat on, and sometimes, and maybe on a little overconfidence too.
Mhm.
Of okay, guys, hey, yeah, we have a lot of talent. Yeah, we've had a lot of success over the years, but you can't just show up. Everybody you play is good. We need to put the time in. And I think that's the beauty of what Coach Majeski and his coaching staff has created, that culture over the years, is that it's hard work. There's no secret formula. There's no trick plays or putting your cleats on the right way or making sure we have the smoke machine when we're running out of the tunnel. No, it was, we're going to work extremely hard in practice so that the
Mhm.
games are easy. So yeah, you're right. We went through some adversity and kind of dug ourselves out. Everybody had to look themselves in the mirror and get better, get
Yeah.
better. Yeah. Awesome fall. A lot of good memories there. Too many teammates to, yeah, you're right. You sound like Adam Welchwell, John Majeski. We just had a really good group of kids. And like you mentioned, it didn't matter. We started first string, second string, third string. That's the coolest thing about winning a state championship, honestly, is, when you win a championship, you walk together for a lifetime as champions, as they say, right? The re the reunions, we did a 10-year, we did a 20-year. I don't know if we'll get together here maybe on the 5-year mark, but just seeing everybody here, and we don't even really talk about Hastings much of what are you doing for work, where are you at, and just a really neat bond, fraternity that nobody will ever be able to take away from you because you won a championship together.
Mm.
I would say that's the coolest part of that whole experience. And then getting to see those coaches, Mr. Hartman, Mr. Moore, Mr. Dahlberg, Mr. Kranz, that coaching staff that was together. Neat stuff. And then the winter season, I played hockey. Um, Sophomore year, I was, I don't know if they still do this. It was a swing line. Like you play two periods of JV or 3 periods JV, 1 period of varsity. My junior year of hockey, I broke my middle of the season. I got hit at center ice and broke my femur, like right above the knee. Oh, just a freak deal. So I missed, and similar to our football program, I'm sure you're aware, our hockey program, it developed into a juggernaut as well. I think they went to the state hockey tournament, started in 96, 97. And then every year I was in high school, my sophomore year, we was at the Target Center then. And then my junior season, again, I broke my leg. So I missed a week. Ended up going to the state tournament. It was the first year at the Excel Energy Center. And we beat Cretan Near Hall in the section finals. I believe Travis Kiefer scored an overtime winner. I was on a bench, but injured. That was a bummer. And then my senior year, so I was able to play football. I had a couple screws inserted into my femur, but unfortunately, on the inside, it started to protrude. So it hindered. I could barely. I played my senior year of hockey, but I could hardly skate because I didn't. If I would have had the screws removed, I would have missed out on the whole hockey season. So I played the football season, healed up for that my senior year, but then senior hockey season, we had a decent season. for our expectations, we had just come off the state football championship, and there was 5 or 6 of us that rolled right into the hockey season. We got off to a slow start. We didn't make the state tournament, so we were the first team in a few years not to go to the Excel. We lost in the section, I believe, semifinals, but I had an awesome experience. Coach Welch, Russ Welch was an awesome coach. So a lot of awesome friendships from the hockey seasons. And then in the spring, I played baseball. Again, I mentioned I played freshman year, I played tennis, and I gave up tennis as a sophomore, played on the sophomore team in baseball. And then unfortunately, with my broken femur, I missed the whole spring season. So I broke the femur in January or middle of the winter, missed the whole baseball season my junior year. Didn't play any baseball that summer. And then senior season, yeah, she got the screws out right after hockey. So I missed some baseball. But I'll tell you what, baseball, even as a kid, was probably my favorite sport. Just there's something about taking batting practice in the summer, shading balls, being out with your buddies, much more laid back. Coach Loudon, Ron Driscoll. We had an awesome group. Mike Harp, an awesome group of, and that was, they beat, you're probably aware of this, but the 99 team won the state championship, and they beat Cretan to end their longtime streak with a guy by the name of Joe
Mhm.
Mauer on it. So as a young, either freshman or sophomore, still remember being up at, they used to do it at the Saints old stadium by the fairgrounds there before they built their new stadium downtown. But when Hastings ended Cretan Durham Hall's run, I was a freshman in high school, and those are some of the best memories. Just going to those games, watching those guys. Again, goes back to that. Was very fortunate to grow up or have all these guys ahead of us that kind of paved the way and set the expectation, right? A lot of times you don't know as a youngster or in anything in life, like you can achieve more. Some Your ceiling isn't here. You can actually achieve more if you put in the hard work, if you commit to doing it every single day. And that was what was created in Hastings in those, and you know that program, right? The expectation. And that's a healthy thing. So we had that in all 3 of the sports that I participated, and I'm truly grateful for that.
Yeah. A long time ago, I had Adam Gerlach on here, and once again, he's saying the same thing that you said, just maybe the golden age of Hastings sports. And it was interesting. He talked about it, and you just mentioned the same thing. And actually, going back even further in our interview, too, you mentioned that just doing all sports we did, and nobody really did one sport, right? And we you guys did everything. So he's saying summertime was a good time. You dibbled and dabbled and everything. And then football season rolled around, and that's the first time you touched a football all year. So football season, you guys go deep into the playoffs, state tournament runs most of the years. And by the time that got done, hockey season was already a week or two into the season. So he's like, I dusted off the skates, got out there on the ice 2 weeks in. My legs were feeling good. We go deep run. Baseball season already started. We play baseball, win the state tournament. A couple weeks in the summer, football's already starting. So it's just pretty interesting that time of Hastings sports where a lot of teams were making deep runs, seasons were overlapping. And the cool thing too is a lot of those names that you already mentioned, some of the names I mentioned too, you guys played all the sports together. You guys played football together, played hockey. A lot of people wrestled, some played baseball. And then once again, people were playing baseball, some were running track, all that kind of cool stuff too. So everybody played everything. Seasons were overlapping, a lot of success, and a lot of the similar names on all those sports teams. So really cool time for Hastings sports.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a probably conversation you have all the time with kids and families now is the multi-sport and just
Mhm.
how much that's changed, right? With the pressures and the old saying, follow the money. And unfortunately, it's in a lot of these sports. That's where what's happened is there's so
Mhm.
much money to be had now, quite frankly, and that there's opportunities to do. It doesn't matter what the sport is anymore, all year round, right? There's camps,
Yep.
there's clinics, there's this, there's that. It's nonstop, which again, like you mentioned earlier, isn't always a bad thing, but I think it's like everything in moderation. But the days of, and you probably, the beauty of Hastings, maybe the size of it, Tim, is you probably still are able to see a fair amount of kids that play multiple sports or play a fall sport, play a winter sport, do a spring sport. I mean, we're seeing it in Lakeville now. There's not many kids that play 3 sports. If they play
Hmm.
2 sports, it's pretty, I think talking to both the varsity hockey coaches, there's only 3 kids north and south that are
Oof.
playing football and hockey. And I'm not sure what it is for the wrestling program, but at these bigger metropolitan areas, yes, to your point, I I think it's unfortunate that kids, but it's the day and age we live in, or kids feel they have to, or families feel they got to go all in at a certain age. But you're spot on. Back in Hastings, that was the beauty of it, is that you can find a lot of joy. I think there's a lot of benefit to playing, maybe being a role player. Does that get lost nowadays, Tim, where you play
I think so.
baseball and maybe you're not the guy. Maybe
Hmm.
wrestling's your number one, but can you go be a great teammate in track?
Yeah.
Or can you go be in cross country, where maybe it doesn't come easy to you? Or I don't know. It's probably another kind of
Great. No,
topic for
I
a
do think it
different
gets lost.
time. But
Yeah. I do think it gets lost in the shuffle. And if someone doesn't have their name next to that varsity spot, then they don't see the value in doing it. And then it's easy to cut ties and leave. But I also think about, you mentioned his name a handful of times here, and I interviewed him. He was my last interview, is Tom Desatel. And kudos to him because you talked about it. You guys were competing for the varsity spot for quarterback. He got it right away, wasn't playing his best. You took over and just ran with it, and you never looked back. So it was your position for the rest of your high school career. And I think it's someone like him too, where once again, how easy would have been for him to cut ties with the football program. I don't even think there was email back then, but so his parents would have had AD and complained to the AD that they think their son should have been the best. But instead, they said, "Hey, go back out there, and coach is going to find a spot for you." And once again, kudos to the high school staff. They found a spot for him, and he played Division I football or Division II, Division I football at a defensive position. So coaches did a great job putting him in a different role. And I know he played some tight end, I think, and safety position, and contributed a huge amount to a state championship team. I just think about that stuff, and maybe that attitude is a little lost in nowadays, but you know, back at 20 years ago, it was not lost. So pretty cool for our sports back then too.
exactly. Yeah. And I would just add too that you probably get the question a lot with kids. So how do you, and again, you and I, we probably never thought about playing in college or the next level. You just wanted to be on your varsity team, but you get the question like, well, gosh, what do we need to do to play at the next level? Or your parents start asking, but you don't have to look too far. Just be coaches, college
Hmm.
coaches. I'm sure when they're coming to talk to you, Tim, are they a really good teammate? Do they work really
Yep.
hard? Dominate at the level you're at. Don't
Hmm.
look at what we're doing in the future, where you want to go. Why not work at being, you're an 8th grader, 9th grader, 10th grader, be a really good teammate. Okay. Know your role, do your role, and work really hard. They'll find you. Work really hard and be a really good teammate. Sometimes I think we overthink it, or to your point, maybe we're not a starter, or we get benched, or we're not in the 8-man rotation in basketball. Now I'm going to go play or focus on baseball, where, let's face it, the lessons, the big picture of athletics is to learn a lot of those lessons of, everybody talks about grit. How do you instill grit? Going through probably some of that struggle to eventually get to maybe where you want to get to, which is, hey, let's face it, everybody minus the 1% that make enough money to prevent, everybody's going to have a day job or be working some sort of, whether it's the business world, wherever, right? Teaching, anything other than sports that's going to help you down the line. And to your point, by not going through that, do we, you can learn it in different ways, right? But
Hmm.
to your, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Perfect. So, John, you mentioned a ton of different names of coaches that you've had throughout your high school career. Or just to name a few, you played for Russ Welch, Bob Majeski, and a bunch of other baseball coaches as well. A good friend of mine is Mike Harp. You talked about Coach Loudon. and once again, a handful of assistant coaches that you played for as well. So I always like to ask who the best coach you played for. So I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for the best coach, but if you want to talk about maybe a handful of those coaches, if any of them did teach you any lessons that really stick with you to this day, maybe just expand on some of those great coaches you had while you were playing for the Hastings Raiders.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start since the fall. I guess I'll start with Coach Majeski. And I think what Bob's secret sauce was, even nowadays you hear they're an old school coach, and that's almost
Mhm.
a connotation of they're too hard on people. I think, especially you know more than I do, but kids want to be coached, right? Good players, good kids, they want to be coached hard. They want accountability. They want discipline. So I think that's what Coach Majeski instilled in the program. And that was the culture. We're going to be really tough. We're going to be disciplined. We're not going to beat ourselves. Accountability and discipline, I would say, and just the toughness and just being uber competitive. When I think of Coach Majeski, I think of a super competitive guy that deeply cared. Although he was really hard on you, it's like that old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that was the thing with Coach Majeski. You always knew he had your back and he cared for you. And because of that, he could be really tough on you. You know what I mean? Like the parents, it's like that art of parenting and coaching, don't you think? It's
Mhm.
like, how do you show somebody you really love them like crazy, but you're also going to be super tough on 'em, right? Because you love them so much. You expect a lot out of them. So I think that was, and to me, he had that. None other coach I've ever had. And just the way he led the program, the same, everything rises and falls with leadership is you always knowing, and especially you look to the head coach. Assistant coaches really matter and are super important, but when the going gets tough, everybody's eyes, and maybe being a quarterback too, you have that kind of a special bond. And Bob, Coach Majeski was the offensive play caller, so you develop a bond with the offensive staff and coach. So for sure, him. The other football coaches, all that I mentioned, were awesome. The one that really had a great impact on me was Mr. Hartman. And I mentioned that Tom Desautel and I were in the quarterback battle our junior year. So, as mentioned, Tom ended up getting the starting job. And I'll never forget this. It was at the old high school. We were down in the locker room, and I was down in the dumps. I almost quit football. And the coaches said, "Hey, do you want to take some reps at defense?" And you're pouty and trying to work hard, be a great teammate still, although you're not starting. And he sat me down in the locker room. Anybody listening to this remembers he had to go down the stairs. It was like a dungeon back in the day. You're down in the weight room was back way in the back corner. Anyway, long story short, he sits me down and he goes, "You know what? Keep working hard. Your time is going to come. You are going to get an opportunity." And as you know from coaching, Tim, I think sometimes he knew me well enough that he could put his arm around me, say, and he had been in my shoes actually. He had played quarterback at St. John's. And anybody that knows Mr. Hardman, just like that fatherly figure, almost a grandfather type figure of just his wisdom and the way he just communicated, so calm, but you knew you didn't want to disappoint him. Sometimes calm and quiet can be misunderstood as being soft, but oh no, you didn't want to disappoint Mr. Hartman. But when he did that day, I'll never forget it because it was like, yeah, hey, well, you could have it a lot worse than not being a starting quarterback, for goodness sakes, right? Keep working hard, your time will come. And sure enough, he was spot on. So I would say those two. And then, yeah, Mr. Welch, Russ was an awesome hockey coach, really hard nosed. And Mr. Loudon, Doc, actually I ran into, we were down at the parade with the kids for the 4th of July, and I hadn't seen Coach Loudon in a long time. And he looked at him as he did 22, 23 years ago and changed the lick. It was great catching up with him. He said they just had an anniversary for get together for their state baseball championship in 25 years. So those would be the coach. There's so many to name. I will actually, a few others to mention. The hockey program in Hastings, we had some longtime coaches at the Pee Wee and Bantam level. Mitch Horsch made a huge impact. He coached the eighth and ninth graders for probably, I'm going to get this wrong, 25, 30 years. But to have that longevity now in youth athletics, you just don't see that. You know that. Or
Mhm.
you guys have that with the wrestling program. Like people that volunteer their time, their kids are way out of the program or way younger, but they do it for 20 years or longer. Mark Chorney, Pat Regan, they were very, at those ages when it's formidable ages, right? Sixth, seventh, eighth grade, it's awkward time. And we had some awesome. So a lot can be attributed to those types of coaches too, where you see it, Little Raiders. There was continuity in Hastings where probably sounds like there still is guys that are coaching and been there for 20, 30 years, the Wagner family. So we were just really fortunate. Eric Stoneberg, Mark Stoneberg, he coached us all the way up. I'm sure you recognize that name, the Stoneberg family. He
Mhm.
coached us in baseball for many years. And I think, like your parents, you appreciate coaches more now. You know, like your parents probably told you, they always tell me at when you're old, it'll all make sense to you someday. You'll
Mhm.
appreciate it someday when you're older.
Yep.
Like coaches the same, like I think they're crazy or whatever when you're in it. But now looking back on it and now starting to coach my kid, it's like, holy cow, you have a whole new appreciation for all the time they put in, right? The patience. You come home from work, you're grabbing your kids, you're running out the door, and all these kids are doing it for, or all these coaches are doing it for nothing. You're not doing it to get rich, but you're doing it to
Mhm.
impact kids. And so just very fortunate to have the coaches as the quality of people that Hastings have. Because you're in some ways a needle in a haystack trying to,
For sure.
a lot of kids don't get to have that, or you talk to people, their experiences, or whether it's college, high school, their coaches. Not that anybody did anything wrong with their coaches, but it's just very unique to have what Hastings had.
Yeah. I'm talking to our athletic director right now, Trent Hansen, and I think I've been talking to people a lot about exactly what you just said, where you just named maybe 15, 20 legendary coaches, people that are coaching 10, 15, 20 years. And we have coaches like you could probably say Coach Hartman and Coach Moore. He was coaching, Coach Moore is coaching grandkids of, one of the first couple kids that he coached. He's coaching the grandkids of those people. When just nowadays, we don't have that anymore. So, like I said, I was talking to Trent Hansen, our AD, and thinking about this a lot. And maybe the average tenure of a high school coach or head coach right now is about 5 years. I think what you're seeing too is just that what we grew up in. I don't want to look at the Wayback Machine again and say back in our day. I feel like I'm getting old now, and I've been saying that a lot lately. So trying not to. Back in our day, we had those legendary coaches that were there forever. And I think the big thing, like you just said too, is a lot of these people are coaching kids that were not theirs. They're coming home from work, rushing out the door, eating a quick meal with their family, seeing their kids maybe for a couple minutes, coaching kids that weren't theirs, coming home, long weekends, long days, and really giving back to the community. And maybe talking about what you said before too, where sports, we get so much out of sports, right? So these coaches got a lot out of sports and they wanted to give it to the next generation. So it's really cool to see. And man, those are, once again, maybe the golden era of Hastings athletics once again, but definitely a lot of those coaches are just the legendary coaches that we had around town. And we still got some great coaches. We have amazing coaches right now at all levels, all sports in Hastings, but a lot of the people you just named are really excellent people and excellent coaches too. I'm sure like you just said, you probably at the time you didn't know what you had, and looking back at it now, you realize how lucky you were.
Big time. Yeah, you're
For sure.
exactly right.
Similar question. I always like to hear about the best teammates you had, and I'm not going to put you on the spot again like I did with the coaches. Some people I put them on the spot. I say I want one person, the best teammate you ever had. I'm not going to do that to you, John, because you named a handful of people. You named Adam Walsh, and Tom Desatel, and John Majeski. For hockey, obviously, man, our hockey program was so good at the time too, where we had kids like Danny Welch and Matt Vanderbosch. And then you go to baseball, and the same names were on the baseball team with Adam Welch and Matt Vanderbosch and Danny Welch, and just so many different people. So I'm not going to put you on the spot. If you want to name one person, I said to Tom Desatel, same thing. He doesn't have to name one person, and he ended up naming just one person, which is okay. So Like I said, I won't put you on the spot, but if you want to do that, you can. If you want to name a handful of people, you can talk about those people too.
Do you name me? No, I'm just no.
He's so
A lot
bitter
of
about the
those guys.
quarterback position. No, I'm just
No,
joking.
a lot of those guys you mentioned. Yeah, just again, fortunate enough to have awesome teammates and that we all grew up together. And thing about those guys that we did all the activities and sports together was is even to this day, some of the more competitive people that I know. And they're just I think we brought that out in each other. We always wanted to like a rising tide raises all boats. And like you mentioned with a lot of those names is you wanted to outdo your buddy or you're competing against yourself and your buddies in a healthy way. Um, I guess the one name to me so Nick Harrison, we met in preschool. We did everything growing up together. He lived across kind of kitty corner from us for a few years. His dad was a builder, is a builder, so he bopped around and built houses and then move every few years. But we met. You see, first day I moved to Hastings from Illinois in preschool, and we did everything together. So Nick and I have remained close to this day, and we just when it came to football, the hockey, baseball, we played everything together growing up. Adam Welch, you mentioned, he was an awesome teammate. He moved his family and being from Hastings, but they were living Kurt, his dad was bouncing around for work, so they moved into town. I think sixth or seventh grade. Tom Destel moved in. His dad took a job in ninth grade. Timmy McNamara comes to mind. We played hockey together, and Tim was extremely hardworking and a great friend, and a lot of memories with him. So yeah, we just those would be Nick would be the name that comes to mind just because we experienced so much together and that type of friendship where you meet in preschool and are friends all the way up. So
That's cool. So you graduated from Hastings High School. Let's walk us through the recruiting process or college selection process. I know it's very different for every single person I've had on here. Some people are like, man, my junior year, I knew exactly where I was going. College coaches were talking to me and I was going there for sure. When some people are like, I didn't know what the heck was going on. I pretty much fumbled through the whole process, landed somewhere and started playing. And actually, after that, too, some people bounce around to a couple different spots. So walk us through what that process was like for you. Obviously, you're a multiple sport athlete, so you might have had a couple different options at a couple different sports, obviously, maybe a couple different levels. Like I said, walk us through what the college selection program looked like for you.
sure. So again, like you just mentioned recruiting was so much different back then, and quite frankly, none of us. I don't remember even like thinking about it until when you get, when you're playing high school sport. That's your dream. Like I mentioned earlier, of being a high school athlete at Hastings, it was. But I always throwing a football ever since I was young. I just really enjoyed it. I liked all the sports in every season, but I knew in high school that's something I maybe wanted to pursue if I had the opportunity to. Now again, we talked. I did not start as a junior in high school for football, which that's when the main season of recruiting is, and it's sophomore junior year. So you get hit with that. And again, like I mentioned with Coach Hartman saying, hey, you could still achieve all your goals here. You're not thinking about college again. You're just starting your high school team. But once I finally got past that, did start a little bit, I knew maybe I had a chance to play. Even then, you're looking up to try to go to camps or you start getting some letters from schools, Division II, Division III schools. I had some D1 AA, or at the time, those schools were all making the jump. That was North Dakota State's. The first time, though, a quick story, they used to do, they still do these 7-on-7 passing camps. So all these Big Ten schools or the Notre Dames of the world, they have the 7-on-7 camps or in the summer where kids come in. So we got a group of kind of a ragtag bunch. There was 7-on-7, we had 8. No, it was like Tom Desautel, I think John Majewski, Nick Harris, I think Eric Stoneberg, um, Tom Cruise, Anyhow, we go up there with eight and literally, Tim, this is in June at the University of Minnesota campus, and there's teams from everywhere. There's teams from Detroit, and they got their whole team, like offense and defense. They got 25 kids, a whole cheering section. There's probably 30, 40 teams up there, and we're a misfit group. We don't even have matching shirts. They got to give us like pennies. Anyways, we lost our first game of this deal, the 7-on-7 tournament, but we ended up running the table and we win the whole thing. We beat this team from Detroit suburbs, and they had some dudes, and we won the whole thing. So that was the first time. And as I'm walking off the field, one of the Gopher coaches, or the running backs coach at the time, said, "Hey," introduced himself. We started talking a little bit, exchanged some information, whatever. At that time, probably giving him my home phone number, right? Didn't even have a cell phone. So that's how in that process, then I thought, okay, that was the summer going into my senior year. So I thought, okay, maybe I have a chance here, or maybe that is in the future. So then from there, I guess the senior season, when your team wins, again, the best way to get recruited is for your team to have success. We had a good season, capped off with the state championship. And so then had some options there. So for me, it came down to, I wasn't quite good enough or didn't have any scholarship offers at the Division I level. Took a bunch of Division II visits, Division III to see what was out there, but ultimately decided to have an opportunity as a preferred walk-on, where you come into camp, you're like a scholarship player, obviously minus the scholarship, which is huge, but you at least get to come in at the same time, get to compete. And so that is what I chose to do. So my freshman year, I spent at the University of Minnesota.
For sure. And walk us through maybe the next couple years after that, what you end up doing, if you continue with football there, if you transferred anywhere else, and then maybe graduation as well. So what your degree was in.
Yeah. That was a recruiting process. So spent my freshman year there, and University of Minnesota. I had a great experience, but I just found out real quickly that bottom line is I wasn't good enough. But it's a big transition going from high school, whether you're playing a sport or not, just going to college. University of Minnesota is a huge place. Probably just fit me well from a school standpoint. You're in a lecture of 500, 600 kids. Met a lot of good guys there. I wouldn't change it for the world. Don't have a regret about doing it, because I had the opportunity, had to take it just to see what it was about, and learned a lot from the coaches there. Still keep in touch with some of the guys, but then ultimately ended up transferring to Wisconsin lacrosse. So I spent 4 years at lacrosse. At that point, I was almost burnt out of football. I almost didn't play after that. Just not that it was a bad experience, but it's just a grind. You're up every morning lifting. I didn't really love it anymore. I struggled academically, like I said, adjusting to the big school. So I ended up going to lacrosse. It was the best decision I made in my life, just from a standpoint. Met a ton of awesome friends down there, had an awesome experience, played football, met my wife there. So then again, at the quarterback position, only one guy plays. I actually went down there. I got beat out by a kid. He had transferred in. We had good players. There's good
Mhm.
players at every level. There's always somebody that's better than you. Right? So you go down there and compete.
Mhm. For
I got
sure.
beat out, but then I ended up winning the job. Then beat him out. Played, started there 2.5 seasons at lacrosse, and we made the national playoffs my senior year and lost in the semifinals. You probably recognize the name Whitewater. That was right when Whitewater was starting to go on their runs. Lacrosse has traditionally had good football. But so I graduated from lacrosse, and my last season there was fall '06, playing for lacrosse.
Nice. So you said you met your wife at lacrosse. So I guess maybe catch us up from graduation day at lacrosse to where we are today. So occupation, you mentioned your kids in the rapid fire if you want to talk about them as well. So once again, graduating from lacrosse, occupation, if you bounce around from a couple different jobs or maybe landed your dream job right away. You got married, obviously, had some kids. So talk about all that good stuff to where we are today.
Sure. Yeah. So I met my wife, Lindsay, at Lacrosse, and we live in Lakeville now. We have three children. We have a daughter who's a fourth grader, a son who's second grade, and our youngest, Luke, is a kindergartner this year. So I trade, buy and sell crane mats for Viking Mat Company, and we're located here in the cities.
Right on. I got a couple last questions then for you, John. But before we get to those, if there's anything else you want to wrap up from growing up here in Hastings, playing youth sports in Hastings, high school in Hastings, college athletics as well. Like I said, anything else you want to wrap up before we get to our last couple questions, you can go for that.
No, I think we covered it, Tim. Just that it was,
Okay.
yeah, I wouldn't change much. Awesome experience, lifelong friends, and a lot of great memories.
Awesome. So the last couple questions we always ask our guests here is about advice for parents, coaches, and student athletes. So if we look at that first group, parents and coaches, once again, you are a lifelong Hastings resident, almost lifelong Hastings resident. We won't talk about those years over in Wisconsin. Those are like the blackout period here. So we won't bring those years up, but playing sports here in Hastings, playing Division 1, Division 3 football as well. If you had to give a couple pieces of advice for parents and coaches, what would it be?
Man, it's going through this parenting, the thing they call parenting now. You try to
Mm,
seek a lot of counsel from others. So for me to give advice, I think just be in the moment, right? It's so easy. And my wife and I, we got to remind ourselves of that every day is the time goes by so fast and you're running from one thing to the next and work and just be where your feet are. I think that's important. And then there's probably a broad range of parents maybe that you're talking to here, whether you have children in high school or younger age. But one thing I was told, and I struggle with this, but it's something I'm coaching the kids now. It's whether it's athletics or school, it's you try to live by it. It's not, I always try to tell the kid, it's not what you did, but how you did it. So by then, it's not whether you scored 4 goals in a soccer game or you got an A on your test. Okay, yeah, that's cool. But it's how were you a really good teammate and did you give great effort? That's really all from a parenting standpoint when it comes to school, when it comes to their activities now as they're getting older. I just think that's can get lost a little bit where there's so much pressure. You probably see it, Tim. There's so
mhm,
much pressure on these kids. Professionalization of all this stuff. The school demands, and they're off to their activity. Heck, our daughter, we were talking, she's fourth grader. She's had something every night for the last 2 weeks. School just started. We run her to an activity, which is great. She enjoys it, right? But you just worry that, hey, let's also keep the perspective of keep the main thing. Let her be
mhm.
a kid. So I think that would be the only piece of advice I would say is number one, be where your feet are. Because it's going to go by everybody you talk to who has children that are out of the house or older, different stages of life, is that it goes by in a blink of the eye. And just to try to really soak it in. So that would be the for parents is just be in the moment.
I
And
like
then
that.
who else
Great.
did you?
I'm sorry.
What other group did you ask me about?
Well,
That was
coaches,
parents,
if you have anything for
coaches.
coaches, if you yeah, maybe you had some bad ones, you wanna give a piece of your mind to the bad ones here. No, if you had any. We usually
No,
lump coaches in with parents, um, but if you had anything to say, to coaches or because we do have a lot of coaches here at Hastings High School that listen to this podcast. But you mentioned already a lot of the great coaches you had, and you talked about all the great experiences they gave you. And I know I wrote down Coach Hartman because I'm gonna text him, probably see him tomorrow about just those little conversations that coaches can have that maybe it's I don't wanna say a throwaway conversation. I'm sure Mr. Hartman had a lot of those one-on-one conversations with kids. Like I said, I don't wanna say it's a throwaway conversation, but maybe we don't realize how impactful some of those little conversations are with people. And in your, life, how important that was and how life-changing that small conversation he had with you was. So, I feel like I don't wanna steal your thunder, maybe that's what you're gonna say. Maybe I stole exactly the words out of your mouth here, but like I said, so coaches listen to this and maybe we could take a little bit of advice from you for, our coaching staff. So, if you had to give us some advice, what do you think that would be?
I would do, first of all, thank you. Like you touched on. all the volunteers, the time that they put in, first and foremost, that thank you very much for it's a service, right? To the impact that you can have as a teacher and as coach is second to none outside of parenting, right? On children. So thank you very much. I think coaching, and you have it even on, I saw it on your email, there's transactional versus transformational. And I know Trent Hanson's been big with that at your culture there in Hastings. And there's that is a Jeff Erdman, or he's a former Baltimore,
Mhm.
you'd know the name. Anyways, he wrote a
No,
book on it,
yeah.
but it goes back, you don't know how much kids don't, doesn't matter how much you know until how much you care. And I think as coaches, you can still be really hold them accountable, be disciplined or make sure they're disciplined and hold them to a very high standard, but also love them up and really care about them. I think it's that balance of that secret sauce, right? Sometimes I think now,
Mhm.
again, we're back to the nowadays, but even coaching the kids is we can almost go too far the one way of, oh, it's just all rainbows and butterflies and fun. I think there needs to be structure, there needs to be accountability, but at the same time, the putting your arm around them, loving them up, and that they know how much you care about them so that you can push them. Isn't that I think the role of a coach, a really good coach, is getting kids to achieve more than they thought they could achieve themselves, is pushing them to a level that whether it's a good leader at work or a good boss at school is taking you to a level, pushing you further than you can get to on your own. So that's another thing.
That's great. The last group that we like hearing advice for is our student athletes. Talking to those kids that are in high school right now, maybe those kids that are about to be in high school, maybe those kids are about to graduate after this year and go play at some sport somewhere at some level. If you had to give those kids maybe 1 to 2 pieces of advice, what do you think it would be?
Just enjoy it. Enjoy the time together. It's the moments, the memories. Look, you even this conversation now, Tim, when you look back, or we mentioned getting together at the reunions, it is you forget all the scores, the plays, but what you don't forget is the relationships, doing the stuff in the locker room, right? The bus rides. Even looking back, Tim, I'll tell you, in college, there were some games on road trips that whether my parents would come or buddies' parents would come, we wouldn't ride back in the as crazy as it sounds, like you'd go on a road trip, you'd play the game. Most of the time we'd all ride back on the bus, right? But occasionally you'd jump in with mom and dad, or maybe we'd buzz over to Madison or whatever it was. Looking back on it, I wish if I could go back in time, that would be one thing, like cherish that time in the locker room, those bus rides, all that little stuff, because you get that in life when your kids are born, like those special, but it doesn't happen like it does how frequently it happens for the age of kids in high school.
Um, John, that's all the questions I got for you. Anything else you want to get off your mind? Any other shout outs you want to give? The microphone is yours and you can go for it.
No, appreciate you having me on. Thanks for the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, John.